how much do political parties evolve? Specifically, how much have the current political parties changed from what they were just one generation ago?
Nothing stays the same. Our lives are not static. So all political parties do is they mirror what humans do. But I think you bring up a good point. Because they have shifted so far to the left in many places.
Mark my words, I think the shift is here, and I think the Democratic Party has moved so far. Welcome, everybody. Today, we are going to talk about something that has been on a lot of folks' minds lately, and that is how much do political parties evolve? Specifically, how much have the current political parties changed from what they were just one generation ago? And we're going to start this by going way back. And you just imagine that the year is, 1870, or for that matter, even 1910. And I tell you that there is a political party, and it is mostly made up of voters from the northern dense cities, oftentimes people who are immigrants. This party goes to war with the other party, which is largely based in the South. That other party is not known for sticking up for the rights of racial minorities. This party is the party of environmentalists, and a number of its leaders have worked very hard to break up and give hell to the big corporations that they think have too much power. You would say, well, what party is that? And of course, we're talking about the old Republican Party, the party of Lincoln, the party of Teddy Roosevelt, that really had a lot of those qualities. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt was in many ways the first environmentalist, and he was somebody who ran for office on a platform of busting up the big corporations that he thought that had too much power. Then you fast forward, to the 1920s, and the Republican Party has shifted. It's in the 20s, it's the party of big business and laissez-faire capitalism, and the demographics have shifted and so on and so forth. And then you fast forward another generation to the 1960s. And now in the 1960s, the voters in the South are abandoning the Democratic Party in a big way. Lyndon Johnson was in many ways, as you could argue Bill Clinton, but Lyndon Johnson was the last great Democratic Southern presidential candidate. You have another shift in the focus of the parties and their demography. I submit, and that's the topic of this episode, that another shift is underway. Just a few years ago, just a few decades ago, within most of the people's watching lifetimes, the Republican Party was the party of the Eastern elite. You think about George Bush the First. He was a Connecticut Yankee, the consummate gentleman. His father was a senator. The people who voted for him were highly educated, people who lived in big cities, who had college degrees and graduate degrees. And then you look at, by the time his son got elected, George Bush II, the family literally moved to Texas, folks. They literally shifted to Texas, and you could argue adopted a different persona, the golly gee shucks persona that George Bush II excelled at. Really, that has been a major shift in the Democratic Party recently. It's no longer the Democratic Party is now the party of the educated elite, and the Republican Party is not.
Like, if you were to pick a person from the 1990s who embodied that East Coast elite WASP, it would be Christine Todd Whitman, who was the governor of New Jersey. She was a Republican. Yeah. But right. You would, she was the poster child for a prep school East Coast WASP elite.
Mayflower descended,
yes,
highly
correct.
Educated. Yes,
that's right. And she was Republican, and that you're right. That was the perfect snapshot of that Republican Party. You're right. The white, what do they call them? The white shoes, with the white pants. Yeah, right.
The old New York Knickerbocker type, right? The fascinating thing is that we have seen a shift. There are some statistics out there that I've seen that shows that working people are increasingly voting Republican. People who do not have a college degree are increasingly voting Republican. The Democratic Party, according to many Democrats, has shifted very, very far left compared to the party of Barack Obama and the party of Bill Clinton. And the question that I pose for you, David, and for our viewers is, what does this mean for the future of the political parties? Will the Democratic, look, I became a Democrat because I believed that the Democratic Party was there for working men and women. That was it. It was that simple. It was like, this is a party that gives people like my dad and my grandfather a fair shake. My grandfather was a coal miner. My father was a public school teacher. It's like, he's not going to have their hand in his pockets. Arguably, if the Democratic Party continues to lose the working class vote and does not focus on the needs of working people, things like affordability and bread and butter issues, what does that mean for the future of the Democratic Party?
I think that we are seeing the Democrat Party shift, at least in New York, it's shifted, right? Virginia, it's shifted. But California, I think, has led the way in that. And I think what we are seeing is a much much more progressive shift for the Democrats. But Mike, you know what I always like to say, and that is that too many people are involved in what I call presentism, and nothing stays the same. Our lives are not static. Human nature is not static. So all political parties do is they mirror what humans do. And that as humans get older, their needs shift, their goals shift, their aspirations shift. And that's what happens to parties. So the people who are in these progressive parties now, who are the young progressive Democrats, like Mike, uncles and cousins who call themselves Latinxes, right? Those folks. But as they get older, they're going to change. And the party that they align themselves with now, that's going to change too. They're going to get jobs. They're going to have children, maybe. I don't know. I think parties do exactly what humans do. They change as the times change and as what they as humans aspire to and need change. What are your thoughts on that?
I just think it's fascinating that increasingly the Democratic Party is a coalition. Will Rogers said that in the 1940s, right? But increasingly it's a coalition of the most educated, wealthy elites, people with extremely high net worths who live in cities, people who have 2 or 3 degrees, and a coalition of largely different people of color, different groups of people of color who are fighting for their peace. And by the way, there's micro trends within this. There was the election from 2 years ago. There's the election that's about to happen. What's fascinating is I also read statistics that say that by and large, immigrants are not nearly as woke as the progressive, coast elite WASP wing of the Democratic Party. And it's so fascinating because I will just say this. If these trends continue, if increasingly you see 1 or 2% of working men and women abandon the Democratic Party every year, I think that will mean that the Democratic Party will stop looking out for men and women like that because it won't be the base anymore. And that will create a very fascinating dynamic in this country. And it's not one that I want to see. I'd like to see both parties, frankly, look out for working men and women. But mark my words, I think the shift is here. And I think the Democratic Party has moved so far that it's going to be hard to attract those core voters again. Everyone is looking at the midterms this year and saying it's going to be a groundswell of support for Democrats. I think that's accurate, but it could mean that it continues to be hard to capture the Oval Office.
So, Mike, I mean, if you look at the origins of the Democrat Party, I always see them as the machine that was at the wharfs when the immigrants got off the ship. And they would say, hey, we're going to find you a job. They find you a job, through Tammany Hall or whatever, and, or Philadelphia, Baltimore, all these great harbor cities.
Sure.
And they would the machine would take them in and they would find them a job in the machine, right? Whatever it is, that's what they were there for. And they created lifetime Democrat proponents by doing that. And I think they did that up until just very recently when people will come over the border and, hey, we're going to bring you in. We're going to find you a place. We'll take care of you, just vote Democrat. But I think you bring up a very good point because they have shifted so far to the left in many places that these immigrants coming over are like, yeah, thanks for the blanket, but what the hell? Like, you know what I mean? I appreciate it. I don't know about all that other shit. I mean, I don't know if you've ever met someone who has just crossed over the border from, Venezuela or Colombia. They don't have the same principles as some of these, progressive Democrats. Or if you've ever seen an African immigrant from Africa, very different. Those
immigrants from Asia,
they don't fly.
Yes, but that could be something. I mean, look, I'd like to know what the viewers think. I regularly hear from people out there who come up to me in public or send me emails online, and they say, look, they accuse the Democratic Party of moving so far left so fast that they're losing everybody from immigrants to now again one electoral landslide, and the media will be talking about, oh no, this is the new brand of the Democratic Party and everybody loves Damian. But that's nonsense. And by the way, that drives me nuts when the media does that. When I think I've posted this on Twitter, X, never mistake turnout for a landslide. Like never mistake a change in turnout for a mandate. It's like there's these natural ebbs and flows. Like the party in power in the White House tends to lose seats, right? In the midterms. You're like, oh, it's a reward of blah, blah, blah ideas, Democrat, Republican. It's like, no, this is just a turnout trend. This is just the tide comes in, the tide comes out. It's not anybody rewarding different ideas. It's just different types of voters voting. It's just a different, but I think these trends cannot be ignored. And I've heard great minds within the Democratic Party, people like Lorena Gonzalez, who's the chair of labor in the party, say that this is a real problem, that Democrats have to go back to the bread and butter of looking out for men and women who are hardworking, working people. And if that doesn't happen, we're going to see a sea change happen in this generation as well.
I agree with you. I also agree that every person who comes to the to the United States should subscribe, right?
Yes.
Watches on a daily basis. I think
David
I would
will
make
give
them
you a blanket.
it would make them much better citizens, much better participants in our governmental processes. So, Mike, great discussion. I'm sure we're going to have many more like this in the upcoming episodes as we see things evolve on the political stage here in California and across the states. So, hey, everybody, appreciate it. Leave us a message. If you agree with Mike, let him know. If you think Mike is crazy and a traitor to his own party, let him know.
Thanks for watching Smoke and Power.